The sun rose slow over the mesas, painting the land in honeyed fire. Wind sifted through the sage like an old woman combing through memories. From a distance, Silas Hart's cabin looked less like a home and more like a scar, a rough stitch in the endless skin of desert. Inside, a man sat alone at a wooden table, hands folded around a tin cup that had gone cold long ago. Silas had not spoken to another soul in months. Since the fever took his wife, silence had built its own walls inside him. He kept busy, chopping wood, mending fences, counting days by the creak of the windmill. But even silence, he'd learned, could start to rot if left unattended. So when the preacher's boy rode up last week and said, "There's a girl what does cleanin', Mr. Cheap and Quiet," Silas had nodded. Quiet sounded safe. Quiet was something he understood. Now, as the horizon shimmered with heat, he saw a lone figure on horseback approaching, a slender silhouette against the brightening sky. She rode with an easy rhythm, back straight, braid swaying dark against her shoulder. When she reached the yard, she dismounted without hurry, tied her horse to the post, and looked straight at him. "You're Mr. Hart?" Her voice carried lightly, but it was steady, as if the land itself spoke through her. He nodded once. "You the cleaner?" "Nia Willow." Her name lingered in the air like smoke. She didn't smile, but there was no fear in her either, only a calm curiosity that unsettled him more than a gun ever could. He stepped aside to let her in. The cabin exhaled dust as the door opened. Inside, the air smelled of dry wood and old grief. Light slanted through the window, revealing the hush that had settled like a second skin. She surveyed the room quietly, the half-mended chair, the faded quilt, the table with 2 mugs though only one was ever used. Her eyes found the small shelf where a silver hairbrush rested beside a cracked mirror. For a moment, something flickered in her expression, gone before he could name it. "You can leave those be," Silas muttered. "Ain't no need to touch what don't bother nobody." "I only clean what's ready to let go," she said and began her work. Her movements were slow and deliberate, almost reverent. Dust rose and danced in the sunlight before settling again. Silas stepped out to chop wood, but through the open window he could hear her humming, a low, haunting tune that didn't sound like any hymn he knew. The melody wrapped around the space, softening it. For the first time in months the cabin felt alive. When he came back in, she was kneeling by the hearth, hair loose, sleeves rolled to her elbows. The sight stirred something uncertain in him, a reminder that life could still move gracefully inside ruins. She didn't look up when she spoke. "You keep your wife's things close." He froze. "What's that to you?" "Nothing," she said gently. "Only that they're still listening." He turned away, ashamed of how easily she'd seen through him. Some things are best left quiet. She didn't argue. The rest of the afternoon passed in a silence that wasn't empty but patient. When she finally stepped outside to fetch water, he caught himself watching her, not the curve of her back or the fall of her braid, but the steadiness in her steps. The way she moved as if every moment, no matter how small, had meaning. By evening, the sky bruised purple, and thunder rolled along the horizon. "Storm comin'," he said, glancing up. Nia tilted her face to the wind. "Feel strong. I should head back. You won't make it to the settlement before dark. I've ridden through worse." A crack of lightning split the sky. He hesitated, then said, "There's space by the fire. You can stay till morning." Her gaze met his, a flicker of distrust, then something softer. "All right," she said. "Till morning." When the rain came, it came hard. Sheets of water battered the roof, wind moaned through the gaps in the boards. Inside, the fire threw gold and shadow across their faces. Silas poured 2 mugs of coffee, the smell rich and bitter in the air. "You don't talk much," she said. He gave a dry laugh. "Ain't much to say that the wind don't already know." She smiled faintly, the firelight catching in her eyes. "Maybe the wind's tired of carrying your secrets." That silenced him. They drank in quiet until she began to hum again, the same tune as before, soft but steady. "What song's that?" he asked. "An old one," she said. "My mother sang it when the world broke. She said it keeps the pieces from forgetting each other." He watched her hands resting in her lap, scarred, steady, alive. He wanted to ask what had broken in her world, but the question felt too greedy. Instead he said, "It's a good song." She met his eyes, and for a heartbeat he forgot the sound of rain. When dawn came, the world smelled new. Mist hung low over the fields. Nia stepped outside, boots sinking into wet earth, her braid glistening with dew. Silas joined her, holding 2 tin mugs. "You could stay on another day," he said. "Plenty left to clean." She looked out toward the horizon. And what about the things that can't be cleaned? He didn't answer. She took the cup, fingers brushing his, and that brief touch felt like sunlight through a cracked window. For 2 days she stayed. They worked side by side, her sweeping, him repairing the fence. At night, they shared cornbread in silence. She spoke of the river valley she once called home, burned in a raid when she was a child. He told her how his wife had loved the color blue so much she painted the window frames with crushed berries. Their words weren't confessions, just small offerings placed carefully between them. On the third afternoon, a rider appeared, a townsman rough-jawed and mean-eyed. He reined his horse hard at the fence. "You got company, Hart?" Silas straightened. "She's hell-pin around the place." The man snorted. "That what they call it now? Folks'll talk." Naya's shoulders stiffened. The man's gaze lingered too long before he spat in the dirt and rode off laughing. When the dust settled, she began packing her few belongings. Silas stepped forward. "You don't have to go." Her voice was calm. "You don't have to defend me either. I should have said something." She met his eyes. "You said enough by not saying it." Shame burned through him. "Please," he said softer now. "Don't leave like this." "I've been leaving all my life," she replied and mounted her horse. "This time it's easier." He watched her ride away until she was a blur against the horizon. The quiet that followed wasn't peace, it was absence. He sat by the fire that night, holding his wife's silver brush, wondering how long a man could live with ghosts before turning into one himself. Days passed. The rhythm of work returned, but the world felt smaller. The wind carried fragments of her song through the sagebrush. Whether it was memory or mercy he couldn't tell. Finally, one evening when the sun sank behind the red cliffs, he saddled his horse and followed the old river trail. He found her near a stream, washing dust from her hands. She didn't look startled when he dismounted. "You shouldn't have come," she said. "Couldn't stay." He hesitated, then added, "Not without saying what I should have said before." She waited, silent as the water. "I was scared," he admitted. "Not of them men talkin', but of what it'd mean to care again." Her eyes softened, though her voice stayed quiet. "Fear's just grief that forgot how to pray." He stepped closer, holding out a small box. Inside lay his wife's ring, dull with years of silence. "I kept this because I thought holdin' on made me faithful," he said. "But maybe it only made me afraid." Naya looked at the ring for a long moment, then pushed the box gently back into his hand. "Keep it," she whispered. "But wear it as a promise to the living, not the dead." The river murmured between them, the sound like breath returning to the world. He felt something inside him loosen, the years of guilt, the weight of Wattis. When he looked at her again, he saw not a savior, not a ghost, but a woman standing whole in her own light. "Will you come back?" he asked. She smiled, small but true. "If you've room for more than memory." He nodded, and together they turned toward the mesa, where the first stars were beginning to appear. The ride back was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet now, one that held space instead of sorrow. Weeks later, the cabin smelled of cedar and smoke. Fresh curtains fluttered at the window, blue as crushed berries. The brush still sat on the shelf, but beside it lay a bundle of wildflowers. Silas mended fences in the yard while Naya hummed inside, her song drifting through the open door. The land had softened around them. Even the wind seemed to pause before passing through. Sometimes at dusk he would catch her watching the horizon, her eyes full of distance and peace. Once he asked what she was thinking. "That storm's end," she said. "And when they do, the earth remembers how to bloom." He reached for her hand then, just briefly, just enough, and she didn't pull away. In the stillness that followed, the desert held its breath. The sun slipped behind the cliffs, painting everything in gold, and the cabin that had once been a scar now looked almost like a heart, weathered, open, still beating. And somewhere inside that fading light, two souls, worn and mended, learned again the simple, wordless language of staying.